districts in the country. Earlier today, the Kansas City Star had a story about some of the third-party groups that evaluate the House seats just shifted this district from leans Republican to toss-up. And that has a lot to do with both the big push to get folks registered as Democrat. We have a high number of unaffiliated voters, and we have a closed primary. So we've had a big movement to get folks, to register as Democrats. So that's a piece of it. And then the other piece is just the level of activity that we have here, from young people like the march, but also just in general, the number of people who have stepped up to run for office, and also who are actively engaging with the Democratic parties.
That would be very exciting. And you have a really late primary.
We do. I was going to say the latest in the country, but I'm not positive about that. So
no, Florida's later than you, but only by a few weeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's August 7th. So it's one of the later ones for sure.
But it does feel like a late primary could be advantageous for the incumbent, because it looks like right now he's unopposed in the Republican primary. So he's focusing all of his effort on the general, where you'll have to focus on the primary up until August.
Right. I guess I think of it as, well, one, because I got in later than the other candidates, it's an advantage for me for sure, because it gives me a chance to really continue to build up the momentum that we came out of the gate and immediately got a lot of great momentum. The later primary gives me a chance to get out in front of as many people as possible. In Kansas, we don't generally have, particularly for this seat, we don't generally have strong primaries as Democrats. So one of the things I think is going to be the advantage of us having some time for primary is that certainly the strongest Democratic candidate is going to be in the general, and then it also gives us an opportunity to engage as many people as possible. So maybe I'm ever the idealist, and always try to be super positive as much as I can about the situation. So
let's talk a little bit about money and fundraising, though, because I know the incumbent has just this massive war chest.
Yeah, yes, he does. In looking at where the fundraising comes from, certainly our incumbent gets a lot of money from the gun lobby and from industries like the payday lending. And, I think that's one of the things that I have felt we need to move away from having large amounts of money coming from concentrated areas, because I think it's doing a lot of damage to our ability to have a more representative government, because it reduces the number of people who are able to actually get in and effectively mount campaigns.
So I was just wondering if you think you need as much money. One thing we've heard from some candidates is that they think that they can run campaigns more cheaply than has been done in the past. Is that something that you're hoping to do?
Certainly, I'm hoping that we can do things more efficiently and effectively, because I do think TV is going to continue to play a decent sized role, at least in this next couple of election cycles. But certainly our ability to reach people through social media is something that we're gonna really try to depend on, not to the exclusion of TV, which I think is the TV and mailers are the most expensive parts of campaigns. But a big piece of what we're trying to do is, I have spent time doing community development and kind of organizing type of work, and having boots on the ground and folks who are out there as part of a volunteer team is something that we're really building up. In the first few weeks of the campaign, we actually had over 200 people reached out, expressing interest in volunteering on the campaign. And that number just, it grows every time we do something, either publicly or just engaging folks on Facebook a lot, really.
And you've been doing some fun YouTube fundraising as well.
I think one of the things that, particularly for me, it's easy to read somebody's resume or see their experience and think you might have a good feel for them. But I think that the videos that we're trying to, we're spending time putting up the little videos I'm more than just a picture. When we go to events, there's only so many hours in a day to go to. So videos are a really good way for people to just get a feel for me and get to hear from me in a less just one-on-one or small group setting. So
And you do have a fundraising deadline coming up on Saturday. If people would like to give, how do they do that?
We do. So, yeah, the fundraising deadline's on the 31st, so Saturday. It's really easy to contribute on our website. It's shariceforcongress.com. That's SHARICEFOR and then congress.com. Yeah, we also have on our Facebook page, you do at Sharice for Congress. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. And then my Twitter handle is just Sharice Davids. Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible for people to find the links to contribute to the campaign. One thing I do want to just kind of plug, because I'm actually very proud of this, is that we have over 600 individual contributors that have reached out and contributed to the campaign. And in just a little bit less than a month and a half, that number to me is, and I've talked to a lot of people who have said, I'm going to see if we can do statistics on this actually, because I've had so many conversations with people who have said, I've never given to a political campaign before. I've never spoken to somebody who was running for Congress before. Those are the kinds of things that I'm actually really, really proud of and excited about, is that we're bringing in people into this political process that often are not participating. And a lot of times I think it's because there are people who are just often not engaged by candidates. And so I'm really excited about that.
If you were elected, you'd be the first Native American woman in Congress, which is kind of shocking.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think about? Is that something that is part of what's driving your campaign?
Well, so it's interesting because I definitely wouldn't say that in terms of like motivations and why I'm doing this, it wasn't a part of the calculus that went into deciding if I was going to take on this, frankly, like audacious goal of running for Congress as a first generation college student, person who doesn't come from a family with a bunch of money. And, there's all the different factors. But when I found out, which was actually after I had already made my decision to run, that there had not been a Native woman in Congress before, my first response was exactly what you did, which is like, wow, really? That's hard to believe. But then at the same time, if you look at the long history of our country, Native Americans weren't recognized as citizens of this country until 1924. And so it's only been 100 years, which in the grand scheme of things is not all that long. Once I stopped and thought about it for a few minutes, it was the knee jerk was, wow, really? And then it was, well, there are structural reasons that we're still having firsts in 2018 in this country. Honestly, the thing that I think about more often is my hope is here. Part of what 2018 is going to mean for the history of this country is that we're going to see a whole lot of firsts, not just this race, not just what I'm doing, but across the country. We've got record-breaking numbers of women running, people of color. We've got a lot happening in 2018 that I think is indicative of where the future of this country is going. It is really where we have been for a long time, striving toward these ideals of all people being created equally and everyone having a fair shot to work hard and achieve whatever it is that they're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It seems like there's just tremendous energy, and we've talked to so many people on this podcast who had never thought about running for office before November 2016, and maybe some good will come out of the bad, but it's really exciting to see people who hadn't been thinking about serving their country in that way and stepping up and doing that.
The biggest thing that I'm excited about from one, starting this process, me deciding to run for Congress, the biggest thing that I have been just so it actually helps me feel even more empowered and inspired is the number of people that I've talked to who have said, actually a number of college students have reached out, quite a few high school students that I've had conversations with. When we talk about what does it mean as a 17-year-old who is just thinking about going into college, that to have somebody say, I actually am going to think about whether or not I would ever want to run for office. When I was 17, that definitely wasn't at all on my radar of things to be thinking about, or how do I get engaged, to make a difference. I don't feel like that's what I was thinking about when I was 17. And I'm very, very heartened, and it's inspiring to me to see that.
It was something I was thinking about at 17.
Oh, really? That's so awesome. What were you thinking about?
I'm sure I've told this story before, but I have an autobiography that I wrote in like fifth grade. It was a school project. And in the autobiography, I said, I'm going to be the first woman president. And,
Oh.
years later, I thought, well, of course I won't be the first woman president because surely there will be women before I get to be old enough. And, here I am about to turn 40 and there still hasn't been a woman president. But as much as that was something that I thought about as a kid and I thought about in high school, I didn't do anything about it, So for years, politics just sort of became this thing that every 4 years I'd think about.
Hmm.
And it's only now that it's sort of come back and I've said, oh, right, I love this. I love this getting involved. And so even for some of us who did think about that as a kid, this is a different moment.
Hmm. And I think it's, this is certainly in my lifetime the most engagement I feel like I've seen on such a broad scale. There have been some times where we see swells of engagement and activity, but this just feels so much bigger this time in history. I'm excited, although I too, after the election, woke up and I was upset, and then I was fired up.
Well, and you were working in DC during the transition.
It was certainly chaotic, although, I don't know, especially in the last couple of weeks, it feels like, did it ever stop being chaotic? I mean, I wasn't there in DC when the transition for President Obama, when he came into office, happened, but from everything that I knew about it, it was actually considered, one of the smoothest transitions. And then to go from that and see the level of institutionalization of what that transition is supposed to look like to what we saw where we're a year and a half in almost, and we have positions that don't have appointments yet. I don't know. It's disappointing to see because that actually puts a lot of pressure on the people who are career civil service folks who they have jobs to do. And, everything I saw while I was in DC was the career civil service people are doing such a great job of keeping everything moving. And, they have programs that help people all across the board. And when decisions, the political appointees have to make certain decisions. And when they're not there to do that, it puts people in a hard spot.
I did want to mention that you are a fellow podcaster, which is exciting. I don't know if we've had podcasters in Congress before, but
I don't know either. I should check it out. And this is why I was really excited when I found out about your podcast. I was like, oh yes, I love it, because I think I'm an avid listener of podcasts, which is what led me to want to do a podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs and I try to focus on women and people of color and LGBT entrepreneurs on Starty Pants. We're on hiatus right now, but we'll probably pick it back up here in a couple of months. Maybe with a different host. I don't know if it'll be me or not, because I'm had a couple conversations with folks about potentially being a host.
I've heard from a lot of candidates, especially women running for office, that once they say they're running for office, they get a lot of solicited and unsolicited feedback about the way they should dress, the way they should compose themselves, what sorts of things they should say. I'm wondering if you're getting that, and if you feel like you're getting that even more as a Native woman, as a lesbian, if there's an even greater expectation of the ways you should be presenting yourself.
Sometimes it's hard to say where things are coming from. What are people's motivations? I do get a lot of advice and guidance and observations from folks. And I'll start off by saying I take everyone's advice and observations and tips and all of those things. I always will listen to people, because I recognize that I'm not perfect. None of us are. I don't know everything. None of us do. And so I do try to be present and listen to people when they offer those things. And then two, I try to keep in mind that generally people are trying to be helpful. So that helps me, but I do get a lot of advice, and often unsolicited. I think that sometimes some of the advice and guidance that I get is, particularly when it comes from like older men, sometimes I feel like it likely they wouldn't give the same advice to a man, a white male of the same age and qualifications and accomplishments that I have, but I can't say for certain. Do think